like scary movies?
Uh-huh. I'm getting ready to watch a video.
You making popcorn?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. Talk to me. Talk to me.
Hi everybody, I'm George, and this is the best little horror house in Philly, the show where we talk about the best horror movie ever made, according to our guest at least. And you might know today's guest as, among other things, one of the hosts of Doughboys. He's one of the hosts of Get Played, and most relevant today, he's one of the hosts of the spin-off Get Animated. Please welcome Nick Wiger.
Wow, that's me. Hey buddy, thanks for having me.
My pleasure, and it is indeed you. Thrilled to have you on the show today, and famously a bit of a heat seeker, but the question is, are you a bit of a thrill seeker?
Wow, George. I've gotten a lot of questions over the years. That is one of my favorites. So, well done.
We're starting out strong.
Yeah, no, this is great. I am a bit of a thrill seeker, but I think like with my heat seeking, which for people who are unfamiliar with Doughboys, that's how I say I like spicy foods. I like with my heat seeking, the a bit of is key. Like, when I start getting to, like, level 9 or 10 intensity, that's the point where I'm like, I'm not even having fun tasting this food anymore. This is just pain. This is just masochism, right? I'm just subjecting myself to torment to prove some sort of point. So I think it's probably similar with horror, with my relationship to the genre. Certainly as it's evolved over time, I can't take some of the really awful gore anymore. You know what I mean? Or some of the like really depraved, the really upsetting side of the genre. Like some of that stuff, I'm not enjoying this. But horror as a genre, I really like. I am far from an expert on it. Mike Mitchell, my Doughboys co-host, knows a lot more about horror than I do. That's much more of his like sort of genre. But I do really appreciate the genre, and I love a good horror movie like I love any good movie.
Hell yeah, and I think that's certainly relatable for a lot of people. As the effects get better, so too do movies seem more interested in sort of immersing you into it and like really finding your own like squeamish breaking point,
right,
and pushing you to the limit.
Right. And I also feel like I'm just generally more interested in the psychological side of things.
Yeah.
You know, I really love a film like, and hey, this is I'm not going to be impressing the horror nerd listenership with my deep cuts here, because that's not what I do. But like, I love Silence of the Lambs, if you consider that a horror movie, because it's so much of exploring like there is some disgusting gore and some horrific acts that take place, but it is just so much about like the psychological side. That's what they're analyzing, what it is to be somebody so disturbed and what it is to explore their psyche.
So psychological horror definitely seems to be one of your favorite subgenres within horror.
Yes.
I'm curious if that's also the case for animated horror, or if you're like, oh, I love that they can pull off sort of supernatural stuff in a way that they can't with live action in animated movies, or if it's still sort of that psychological examination of like existentialism.
Right. Well, no, to talk about, to peek behind the curtain a little bit and talk about how we land on this particular film. You know, another one we talked about was Perfect Blue, which is maybe the greatest anime ever made, one of the best animated films ever made. And that to me very much is the psychological side of horror, even again, though there's some horrific acts that are committed in that movie. Serial Experiments Lane, the series, is kind of like also that sort of side of exploring. It's about just like terror. I have like behind me some stacks of Junji Ito. A lot of that is more like body horror, gross out stuff. But I do feel like a work like Uzumaki, which is so much about, you know, a whole town being driven mad by spirals and the various effects that spirals have in them and the various ways that manifest, is so much about just like an entire community's like minds being destroyed. So yeah, I do like that side of animated horror and horror anime. All that said, the movie that we ended up landing on that I pitched, I don't think is that at all. I think that is like a straight ahead. And I think what we're kind of doing with this one is that we're taking a leap back in time to teenage Wigs, to me, like just thinking like this shit was awesome. And which I still do, but this is very much like a just straight ahead blood and guts hack and slash sort of film.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to talk about Perfect Blue for a second, because it really is fucking incredible. I rewatched it in the lead up to this, just because I was like, I'm in an anime mood now. I'm going to rewatch it anyway. And I find it so fascinating that, especially in animation, there's a real intertwining of body horror and psychological horror, because it's really interested in examining what it means to be you and what it means to sort of tie your identity to the way you look and who you are. And animation can really accomplish a lot with that. And especially in Perfect Blue, this sort of projection of their identity onto somebody else and literally taking their form and sort of warping back and forth at points. It's just such an interesting balancing act of psychological horror and body horror, and how those two things have to sort of be in balance.
Right. No, that's really well said. It's a great point, because it is like so much about, that's the shit I love too, is stuff about like the brain body connection, which also extends into science fiction a lot. Right. But it's just like, I find that so fascinating. For the longest time, I was like, kind of like, well, my consciousness is its own thing. My mind is its own thing. And then as I aged and as my body changed more and more, and I realized how that affected my mind and my brain was changing as well, I was just like, no, I'm a little bit more, like the brain and body is one thing, and it's hard to imagine your physical body being separated from your brain. So much of being alive, so much of being a human being is just inhabiting a body, and that informing your own identity, that being your identity. And so when that is taken away from you, it's existential.
Absolutely. But the movie we're talking about today is Yoshiaki Kawahiri's Ninja Scroll, released in Japan in 1993. I had seen a handful of his work prior to this, like Wicked City, and he had fingers in 2 shorts from the Animatrix.
Yes.
Having directed Program and written World Record, which World Record is my favorite short in Animatrix.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
love that.
Great work by him. And it was all incredible, but then this, which I had not seen when you pitched it, which was actually part of the decision-making process, I just thought it really took it to another level. I loved it so much. And I checked out some of his other work in the lead up to this, like Vampire Hunter D.
Yeah.
The really fun anthology Neo Tokyo, which he did a segment for. But this really was just like the height of his work that I have experienced so far. Are you generally a fan of his, or did this sort of just elevate out of his filmography? Honestly,
when I came upon this film, I was not thinking of anime or animation in the way, like, this sounds dumb to anyone who appreciates and understands film, but like, I'm late teens, early 20s. I'm effectively like a kid. I would think of a person that age as a kid. And so like I'm not thinking about directors all that much. I'm not really even thinking about animation studios outside of like Studio Ghibli and like Pixar, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I just saw this movie, I was like, that movie's awesome, I love it, and I never really investigated who was behind it until years later. You mentioned Vampire Hunter D and Wicked City. Those are both films I saw for the first time pretty recently, because I just always had kind of heard about them, but never really had a reason to actually sit down and watch them. I do enjoy both of them. I do kind of agree with you that I think this is kind of the apex, because those are both the thing with Vampire Hunter D is it's a little silly feeling in a way that this one isn't, and then Wicked City is just
it's wild.
At times you just feel like you're watching straight up porno. It's which this movie has some elements of, but it doesn't push it quite that far.
Right.
My understanding is that the Wachowskis were fans of Ninja Scroll, and that's a big part of why he ended up working on the Animatrix. But I will say that the craft in this film is a big part of what I appreciate as I've gotten older and as I've appreciated that side of filmmaking and animation more.
The movie begins with the success of Wicked City in 1987, and Kawahiri decided to fulfill his childhood fascination with ninjas by creating a historical drama that had homaged the work of Futaro Yamada, celebrated author of detective and ninja stories like the Meiji Guillotine Murders and the Koga Ninja Scrolls. Now, the problem was, in his mind, how to make a Japanese period piece accessible to global audiences. So what he did was he simplified the story a bit, and actually took influence from comparable Western power struggle stories too. The example that he gave was the CIA fighting the KGB, and a specialist is forced to play along. Movies like Black Hat, shows like White Collar, the structure is familiar even if the details are different, which I think is really fascinating, and a big part of why this was such a success abroad as well.
That's interesting. It's also, you hear so much about the American Westerns being informed by like Japanese samurai films, and that we've like reached the point in the Ouroboros of influence where now like the Western canon is going back and influencing Japanese cinema, and then of course that ends up influencing a lot of action movies like The Matrix, which in turn, it's just interesting.
One of the most influential movies of all time.
Right. It's just interesting how this stuff like kind of cross-pollinates.
Absolutely.
But that makes a lot of sense. And I do think it was like a thing where, again, I'm watching this for the first time, many, many years ago, 30 years ago, and I'm just thinking of it like a Western. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, this is the guy who goes to the town and there's problems, and then he goes after the bad guys,
Definitely, yeah. The lone wolf vigilante who can handle it all.
Yeah.
Slight tangent, but an additional relevant discussion that they talked about was how to accommodate not just international audiences, but also the modern pacing. Now that we're not only past the story contemporaneous methods of communication, but especially in 1993, things are changing pretty rapidly. Email is around, cell phones are starting to reach consumer-grade pricing, they're growing in popularity. They said it was a really interesting challenge to keep the tempo going, instead of having to dispatch messengers across Japan every 5 minutes, while also avoiding the bird cliche as much as possible. And so what they did was they went with this interesting Edo period, like, telegraph concept, where it's a spider web of twine that messages vibrate across. Such a great, interesting, and visually compelling way to sort of have the messages get through without us having to be like, oh, it's 2 weeks later for this guy to ride a horse across Japan.
Yes, exactly. Or we have the late season Game of Thrones problem where it's just like, well, now it just feels like characters are effectively teleporting to whatever city they need to be for plot reasons. I think that's really interesting because I didn't even think about the kind of proto-telegraph wire that they're using, that the bad guys are using to communicate as any sort of like solve. But it makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. It's like, oh yeah, these characters in different places, and how do they get in touch with one another?
Works really well, and it just feels like a spider web, almost like they're walking into it. Yeah. But so this familiar, simple, and strong story circumvents any difficulties in transcending the generational gaps, familiarity with historical drama tropes, and even Japan's actual feudal history, period. The examples that they gave were as fundamental story-wise as knowing about the feud between local clans and the central government during the Meiji Restoration, to as simple as someone playing a chamberlain asking, "What's a chamberlain?" And a nice thing about this emphasis on simplicity, paired with the superhuman nature of the ninjas that we see, means that he's really free to take some liberties. He's not as constrained by reality, which is what animation is perfect for.
Right.
There's a moment in the commentary track where they get hung up on the logic hole of Jubei tossing Kagero a tomato, and they had showed spring flowers, so it couldn't be a persimmon, and if Japan even had tomatoes at the time, they were valuable imported products. And he said, quote, "We talked about these sort of things, then landed on, but the image was more important." And I personally think that is a beautiful, expressionistic way to handle creating something.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a story trumps all, or a powerful image trumps all. I mean, you don't want to be so beholden to logic. It's funny that this is also like a pre-YouTube era where they don't have to worry about cinema sins saying, everything that was inaccurate about Ninja Scroll. It's also like, that's another thing of you can check the IMDb goof section of like any like perfect film, and there's always things like this model car actually has the gas tank on the other side of where the gas is being pumped. You know what I mean? It's like there's someone super pedantic is going to find some issue with whatever you do. So yeah, just make whatever is the right decision creatively ultimately.
Yeah, there was another quote where he sort of wrapped up their thoughts on it, where he said, "It would be really strange for someone to accept the existence of ninjas like these and then point out the tomatoes weren't available in the day," which, lovely, naive perspective. That's how you know it wasn't recorded that recently. For
sure. No, 100%. Did you ever have, by the way, I got in a fight with with a friend in college. We were talking about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and he was like convinced that it was like representing a historical reality. He was like, no, people used to be able to do that. Like, with, like it was, I was like, there's no way that people used to be able to like fly from tree to tree and be effectively weightless, while they're fighting with swords. And there's no way people were like jumping onto water and then jumping off of it as if they were jumping off of solid ground. He was like, how do you know? How do you like to pull the "you weren't there" sort of thing?
That's right. That's right. Everybody could wire fight. It was incredible, Nick.
I was like, all right, dude. But I was so like I was so much younger that I didn't realize like, oh, I'm just fighting with a guy who's just dumb, and there's no point. There's nothing I will gain from this. I'm not going to convince him of anything. I'm just wasting my time. So I should have just been like, yeah, dude, you never know. Shit's crazy.
You should have been like, my ancestors actually had those powers.
Yeah.
Distantly related. Yeah.
Back in my homeland of Estonia, they were doing that all the time, man. It's crazy.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, but we forgot our roots.
Sad stuff.
Yeah, it's sad. It's real sad.
Kawahiri comes up with character designs before a script and a storyboard, especially for something like this where appearance is so tied to ninjutsu technique. So creating character images for him was almost similar to creating story ideas. And an example of this was Mushizo, the bee guy. And I thought it was really funny. At one point, he was just like, we thought his back looked cool, and that's why the hive was on his back.
Yeah, right.
But they also asked, once you come up with a ninja, how do you decide how to defeat him? Which I thought was a really interesting question. He often works backwards, which is again tied to this. He says, I want him to die from his power. And that manifests as the bees erupting from him.
Yes.
Which in order for that to happen means he has to be in the water, which means that we'll have to get Jubei in the water and have him cut the root. And it just is interesting to see how the story forms around the characters in a way that doesn't necessarily feel obvious in the telling of it.
Yeah, and to be, super describe this in a super reductive way. I've said before that this movie is basically like a bunch of boss fights, and again, that's probably why when I was a teenager, I was like, "This shit is awesome" because it's so video gamey. Mm-hmm. And then also, things like that character ends up informing. Like there's a Metal Gear Solid 3 boss I think called the Pain, who's
right.
he's got like a swarm of hornets that he controls, and so like you see that sort of this very video gamey feeling movie. Again, I don't know how much of that Kawajiri. I don't know how much he was. Like playing video games or was conscious of video games. It certainly feels like it,
definitely.
but definitely this led to this led to similar things happening in subsequent video games. But yeah, that's a really interesting way to think of it, because that's what's satisfying about all of these deaths is like, oh, they are all kind of hoisted on their own petard,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're connecting sort of video games to anime is really interesting because, you do see it not just in like the format of it. Like you said, it is sort of like boss fight, but it is also like aesthetically you see these things influencing each other the same way that Westerns and anime did. One of the other movies that I watched in the lead up to this was Angel's Egg, which is so similar to a lot of the work that is done in the Souls games, and where the creators of those have even been like, oh yeah, we love Angel's Egg. There are like Easter eggs to it in the games, and it's so fascinating to me going backwards and like having the understanding of the things that have been influenced by it and having that sort of puzzle piece falling into place of like, oh, that's where this influence came from. I find it so rewarding and a huge part of why I like going backwards in film history.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, because I totally the same thing. And you see it all over the place. Like, you see it in comedy too, and it's just like, oh wow, I'd never even heard of this sitcom. I had no, and then you're watching like an old like Bob Newhart one half of a phone call bit, and you're being like, oh, I totally see how this like influenced like Conan O'Brien or whoever. This is the exact same tone. Right. This is the exact same sort of absurdism.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So these rough character sketches then go to animation director Yutaka Minawa, his first feature-length work, and he describes it as, quote, an effort based purely on youth in terms of some roughness but pure passion. He wasn't actually sure he was ready when a producer reached out to ask, but while he was hemming and hawing, Kawajiri called him and he said, suddenly I was saying yes. So, worked out well.
Yeah.
There are 8 ninjas, 8 enemy ninjas, bosses, so to speak, that show up in total, and the moderator of the commentary asked why that many, and in a true Dudes Rock moment, Kawajiri goes, I don't know, I just wanted to see a bunch of ninjutsu. I thought it would be cool.
Dudes rock.
He's right. It was cool.
Yeah.
In the storyboarding process, he seemed really open to collaboration and using the ideas no matter where they came from. They mentioned several times junior animators contributing key art concepts, which I thought was really cool.
That is cool.
And one thing I found interesting as far as style is that many people think of animation as a singular point on the spectrum of realism, when in actuality it sort of contains its own spectrum of realism. And here, things are a little more fantastical, not just in the characters and what they can do, but in the settings as well. You compare it to a Ghibli movie, where a field might represent the variety of flora. But in this movie, again, very expressionistically, you'll only see a single type of flower in a field.
Right.
Or a forest of Japanese cedar trees that only contains Japanese cedar trees.
Sure.
They mentioned it being a stylization choice, but it really, I think, helps to emphasize the important pieces while retaining that simplicity and sort of reflects the story itself in that way as well.
Yeah, and it also feels like kind of video gamey, the setting having such consistency and being so segmented by set piece, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're just going into this distinct biomes, like you're just going into a different level. That's a really interesting context.
Great music as well, done by Kaoru Wada, Akira Ifukube's apprentice, who people probably know from Godzilla. So there it definitely has some of that bombast. And yeah, releases in 1993 in Japan, where it has some moderate success, but when it crosses the Pacific, it's this huge surprise hit. One of the biggest crossover hits to this day, but it came out at a similar time as Akira and Ghost in the Shell, both very popular crossover hits in their own rights, and also very hugely influential. But what I think is particularly interesting is that those are so complicated. I've seen both of those movies a couple times, and I'm still like, I would have difficulty explaining the exact story to someone, I think.
Yeah, both. And look, I've read the Akira manga. I haven't read the Ghost in the Shell manga, but it is like, yeah, these are dense, inscrutable works. And also, like, kind of like horror adjacent. I mean, there's like a lot of like again, like brain body stuff, a lot of like just horrific acts of violence. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Also, I was talking, and my Get Played and Get Animated co-host Heather Ann Campbell, who is far more knowledgeable about all things anime than I, has talked about how like there was like almost like a lascivious nature to how anime was like presented. Like it was kind of like, ooh, this is like kind of like the anime, the animation that's like too hot for like Western audiences,
definitely,
you know, and things like
exactly,
and things like Akira and Ghost in the Shell and Ninja Scroll were presented as like oh, this has like blood and nudity and like this is like, this is like extreme,
right?
Which seems like, I don't know. It's also like that's especially since we're so much more conscious of anime and in the West now, and understand that it's not a monolith. That was like kind of like the dominant way that it was presented back in like the 80s and 90s to Americans. But that was part of what attracted me to this movie. Is just like oh, this is like a really hyper violent like sort of thing that you can also see drawings of boobs, you know?
Yeah, sure.
That said, what you were talking about, it's a really good point, because this movie is just straight ahead.
Right.
Like there's nothing really to like analyze of like, oh, what really happened there? Like I'm not sure. There's not a lot of ambiguity in this, not even like moral ambiguity. It's all straightforward. There's just bad guys who are doing bad shit. They are called devils. They are straight up devils, and they need to be sent back to hell by a virtuous, lone warrior.
That's right, and that simplicity definitely is something that helped people latch onto, especially at a time where they're not as familiar with the form. So,
But I didn't know, George, what you were just saying about how it wasn't all that successful, or at least didn't make an immediate impact in Japan. I am fascinated by that, because like that's always a thing of like, you never know. It's like this is the most obvious example, but it's like how Jerry Lewis was so much more popular in France. You know what I mean? It's like you never know what another culture is going to latch onto from a particular culture. I remember I was talking to someone who was who grew up in Japan recently about Haruki Murakami, and they were saying like yeah, it's interesting, like yeah, we like Murakami, but it's like he's not as big of like a deal out here relative to in America. He's like, oh my god, this is this genius Japanese author. Have you heard this guy? And then was citing other authors that I'd never heard of, and was kind of saying like even working in kind of like the sci-fi magical realism space, like in Japan, these are kind of regarded to the same sort of tier as Murakami. And I'm like, man, I was looking these authors up. It's like some of this stuff isn't even available in English. Like it hasn't been translated, and it's just so. In some sense, it's arbitrary that like what actually connects with overseas, but also there's an element of just like, I don't know, because we are different cultures, because we live in different contexts and have different values. It's like you're going to naturally glom on to different things. I don't know, but I always find that shit fascinating. I didn't know that about Ninja Scroll.
I think it is really fascinating, and similar to the loops of influence that we had been talking about before, I think that does sort of happen when something connects with another culture in a way that it didn't necessarily in its homeland. I think about even someone as hugely famous now as Alfred Hitchcock, when he had his, very popular British films when he was in England still, and then when he came to America, everybody was like, oh, he's just a populist entertainer. These movies have nothing going for it. And it took France and the new wave of France being like, Hitchcock has got it going on. There's worth to these even populist films, that America sort of reevaluated the films that had already come out, and sort of when it does connect with another culture and people go, well, why is it connecting there? I think that it is sort of driving an interesting self-examination too.
I wonder when that will happen with Stephen King, speaking of horror, because I feel like he was an author that, at least me when I was growing up at my age, I always heard him like critically derided. This huge commercial success, but yeah, he's just a populist. He just makes kind of like whatever. He makes airport novels. Right. But it feels like that just anything that big, anyone who's,
shaped the face of horror for so long. Exactly,
is ultimately going to, at a certain point, be viewed as like this auteur, as like this genius influencer on the genre. So I don't know. Maybe it's already taken place and I'm just not paying attention.
Well, I definitely think it is merited, so.
Yeah.
But let's get into the actual movie here. Really badass opening. Our lonely hero, Jubei, is crossing a bridge with a bunch of goons lying in wait.
We're both just going to regress to age 12.
That's right.
It's fucking sick as hell. Fucking
Get
shit
ready.
rocks.
Strap in, listeners. In the commentary, they discuss trying to maintain the traditional hero enters and leaves with the wind. But then they were like, fuck, it turns out having wind flutter around stuff is hard as hell to animate and sync with the cells.
Right. They still do some of it, though.
Yes, they do.
That's the other element, because when you're, especially in a fully hand-drawn era of animation, it is so labor-intensive.
Yes.
And I have no idea how to do it myself, but I can appreciate just how long it takes and how difficult it is, how tough the work is. And so they're making all these decisions when they're writing it and storyboarding it, knowing what they are willing to commit resources to, because you only have so many minutes in your runtime and you only have, so many hands who can draw things.
Right. And it's sort of on the cusp of digital animation. So they sort of have had the time for the techniques of hand-drawn animation to progress and develop in a really interesting way. But they're not like splitting the focus yet between digital animation and hand-drawn. So it's really sort of at its peak at this time. He quickly dispatches the goons, though. I think it's really fun to have this little, like, appetizer of the movie where we get a taste of the character personality and skills. He's goofy, he's calm, he's unstoppable. You get that. But it also turns out to be a good tone setter for the movie itself because it is explosive action. There's this big guy right away, or who turns out to be a tiny guy in a guy suit, so it's funny when you're not necessarily expecting that.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous animation. I just think that this opening scene sinks its hooks in right away, even though it is truly just a tone setter and has no relation to anything else in the film.
No, for sure. I mean, it's awesome. I mean, I like it. Also, I think with things like the character who discards the large fake body and then is just like kind of like a little sniveling guy in his underwear underneath. It's like, it also kind of like, okay, there's going to be some trickery going on here. There's going to be some characters with some sort of like almost like steampunky gear and that's part of the things this protagonist is going to have to deal with.
Definitely. And also just that sense of one-upsmanship is something that they emphasized a lot in the commentary, and something that I think did influence a lot of movies going forward. Even, you see it in things like The Matrix, again, that sort of constant getting the upper hand over your enemy and then having them pull the rug out from under you. And it really works here.
The Matrix has one of the best of those cold open sort of action sequences ever. Like maybe just the best one. It's so incredible.
I recently saw it again in theaters.
Wow.
I just was so blown away by it. It like truly is one of the best movies of all time. It's so incredible. Fucking good. A nasty storm is brewing, and the story begins in earnest. And we see these racing horses past the crashing waves and cliffs and forests. It's this really interesting series of sort of Sumi ink brush paintings almost. And the lighting here and overall is just insane.
Yeah.
Really interesting use of blues and blacks. He said in the commentary, we didn't have many blues to choose from back then, which is funny, but also true, because when you think about the way that digital shading changing the granularity of color.
Yes, right.
And the ease of overlays that change the colors from shadows, for example. It's remarkable here and required a ton of planning, especially as the A, B, and C cells each had their own very different coloration because the light filters forward. So, each layer had to sort of be completely examined differently. And people don't even notice because advancing tech has minimized the effort required for that. So people just go, oh, of course it looks nice, because that's just what you do. But for them to accomplish this is truly technologically astounding.
That's a big part of it, and like what you were saying earlier, just before the just on the cusp of when all this stuff starts to go digital, all the lighting effects and in particular, it's just like, having to do this stuff by hand. It's staggering that they were able to figure it out. I never even thought about that. You're limited to like the number of different paint colors that you have in your palette, as opposed to having this opening up Photoshop and you can just like go ahead and enter whatever hex code you want, or just drag to whatever shade looks appropriate.
Yeah, truly limited.
Right.
They also talked about how horses are just difficult to draw, which I thought was funny. And they were like, our assistant art director got stuck doing all the horses because he could do it.
Well, the running is really well animated.
Definitely.
That's also like I remember watching one of the early uses of film, like motion picture film. It was trying to determine if a horse actually had all four hooves off the ground at the same time while they were running. And I remember watching like a short about that once. And it's cool to see the just their gait animated like that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The next scene is a corpse-riddled town, seemingly dead from plague. It's being chowed down on by some damn crows. And a woman from there approaches another town and warns of both plague, and in the English version only, warns of an evil force approaching, which I thought was an interesting distinction from the dub.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, we see she's being puppeted by someone from the shadows. The people in the area are evacuated to avoid the plague. Hansa, the leader of the Koga ninja clan, reports a group of 8 suspicious ninjas were riding away from Ground Zero to the local Chamberlain. And this Chamberlain is initially reluctant to investigate, but eventually sends the whole clan to pursue this lead, and he says to kill anybody from the group who gets sick. This is something that will definitely come up a lot, but I want to point out how early on, and from someone who is supposedly on the good side, this sort of idea of collateral damage and like the willingness to sacrifice people versus treating them as not expendable. And this is a theme that I think comes up a lot, and especially in the relationship between Jubei and Kagero, and sort of why she responds to him is because he does not do this. It's just really interesting to see that it's not necessarily the quote-unquote villains who are the only ones doing this, that it is on both sides across the board. A character, maybe Jubei himself at a certain point just says, this is an amoral world. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's the Chamberlain's actions, it's all reflecting to use a hyper zeitgeisty sort of thing, a Dune-esque sort of like amorality, like whatever we have to do to survive, right? Sort of a worldview. And Kagero is part of this group, though she's disrespected as a woman in the boys' club. And she demands to come on the mission. They say, you're doing important work already, tasting for poison, the first indicator of her unique abilities, which is fun. But the Chamberlain is away, so she's back with the Koga after chopping off her hair in this big, dramatic symbol. It's a fun scene.
Yeah, great scene.
The problem is, as the Koga run through the forest, they are suddenly annihilated by the 8 demons of Kimon. It is truly wild. I love the ninja stars flashing through. I love the first look at everyone's superhuman aspects. It's bloody as hell. It is just a really incredible gut punch because it's the first exposure to the actual blood in the movie. The first scene, Jubei doesn't really kill anybody because that's not his goal. So here, for them to sort of luxuriate in the blood here is shocking in a very good way.
Yeah, this is the part where, the first off, just like the physics of the ninjas just jumping through the trees is so cool and so video gamey, and I think a thing that's been, reappropriated a lot. But yeah, this was a sequence that I had described to me by a broy friend before I saw it, as I trying to convince me to watch this movie. He's like, he's got fucking bladed boomerang, he throws it, like chops everyone in half, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just like, and it is the sort of thing, you watch this, and if the other cartoons you've seen are, G.I. Joe and Garfield and Friends, you're like, holy shit, like, they can draw this? Like, what I mean? Like, it feels illegal. But, like, also, the Western, like their adult cartoons in the West at this time, and I may be, like, overlooking some, but they're things like Fritz the Cat,
right?
Where it's just sort of like, hey, we know this is like X-rated, like this is for adults, like we're doing naughty stuff. It's not something that is just like, hey, this is just an action movie that's really violent. So it just kind of hits differently. But yeah, all the shurikens being thrown, and just like the way they like impact like the tree branches and shit, like it all also just like looks awesome. It's just amazing craft.
Certainly is. And again, fully analog technique. They talked about adding the blood rain onto the cells after the fact.
Wow.
There was a quote where he said, today with digital, you do the opposite, erasing what's drawn instead, which I thought was a very melancholy way to put it.
That is really interesting.
But one of the demons is this big stone skin fella, Tessai.
Yes.
He literally tears the leader of the Koga limb from limb. A classic tough guy move.
Yeah. Tears his arms off. Nasty shit.
Anyone who's ever played D&D and played a buff character has attempted to tear somebody limb from limb like this to varying success, I'm sure. But Tessai pulls it off with great aplomb.
Yeah. Drinks the blood. Nasty.
Yeah. And yeah, he was described by the team as being possessed by a savage hunger for the basest of impulses. He literally drinks the blood. He licks his lips at Kagero, and you don't know if it's because she is beautiful and he's a creep, or if it's simple bloodlust. And then he specifically tells her he doesn't care which she opts for as he drags her away to assault her.
Yeah. This is pretty much the darkest part of the movie, this next sequence.
Right.
And, that's the thing that is not like the funnest part of like a rewatch, but it is like, again, it just shows how just dark this movie is and how adult it gets, you know?
Definitely.
And how much it deals with stuff that you just would not see in Western animation at this time.
I found it really interesting that in the commentary, Kawajiri was really self-conscious about this scene. He said it was supposed to sort of demonstrate that savage hunger that I mentioned, but he understands that it comes off as really dirty.
Yeah.
He said, where there's no actual sex, it's almost more offensive. But Jubei interrupts, and it's almost like surreal how much his attitude clashes with the situation. There's an aloofness that's shocking and interesting. And he just says, oh, I'm lost.
He's just kind of like sitting there, right? He's just kind of like hanging out.
Yeah. And Kagero is freed when Jubei taunts Tesai about weak points in the rock and quickly launches a dart out that embeds in his eye. Fucking badass.
Very cool as shit.
And they flee, and Tesai goes to chase. He's obviously pissed, but he's stopped by an emissary from Lord Gemma. And he stalks off reluctantly, but they're being watched by a third party, an old man in a tree. What the hell?
Yeah, so this is like a device that Kawajiri also kind of uses in Wicked City, right? There's like an old man in there. Now there he's like a horny Yoda, basically. Right. Like he's like kind of like a comic relief character. And I guess this character is to some degree, but certainly the idea of like this sort of looming old man, this petite, mysterious but powerful figure seems to be like a thing that he likes to go to.
Definitely, and I think that where this particular old man is interesting is that he's a little more explicitly deceptive.
Right.
They've fled. Kagero is grateful but brusque when she says that she has to go. She seems almost shocked to look back and see that Jubei has indeed just like set off down his own path. He lives in the moment. She said, I don't need you anymore. He said, okay, bye. And he walks away.
It's also like there's like this escape basically has like a quick time event where they're running away and he's like, jump. And like they jump over the thrown bladed boomerang and then they like duck and they duck under it, you know?
That's right. It's a classic Leon Kennedy move.
Right.
On the other hand, and I like this moment too, Kagero goes off alone and she finally lets herself cry. You know, she just witnessed her entire ninja clan slaughtered with ease.
Yeah.
She was almost raped, but when Jubei asked if she was okay, she pushed back really hard. And she's clearly had to harden herself, lest anyone call her into question simply for being a woman in this boys' club that I mentioned.
Right.
It's also an interesting match cut to the Chamberlain being informed of the massacre mid-coitus and dismissing them as useless after all before returning to thrusting. It actually kind of reminded me of famously tragic film Come and See. There's a moment in that where a Nazi is eating a sandwich while watching the barn full of people burn down, and it's just like a casual inhumanity that is so powerful and so disturbing.
Yeah, for sure. That's like the thing, just like the callousness of it is really what, like, it's like, oh, you are just completely disconnected from your core humanity at this point. You can't even see other human beings as equivalent to you.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing that, and I don't know if timeline wise this even makes sense. We obviously have the reveal that happens later on with the Chamberlain.
Right.
Do you think the Chamberlain is the Chamberlain at this point? Or has he already been taken over by the Eight Devils?
That's a really good question. And I think that part of what makes it so great is that ambiguity. I think that he has. I think that when we see like the woman being puppeted into town, I think that's sort of the devils making their move. And that sort of like is the beginning of them laying their roots into the town and taking over. I think that somewhere in there, maybe even the real ones sent them all out. And then and then here is the other one that the reveal will happen. But it is interestingly ambiguous. I think it's a really fascinating question, and the fact that he's so evil in his like normal form that we're like, he's completely indistinguishable from the main enemy of the movie.
Okay, so I will just say, like, if anyone wants to lob any grenades at this movie, I think that scene is maybe a place where you could be like, look, this is this sex is completely gratuitous. Like if what you're trying to do is be like, hey, this guy is doing something mundane and banal while casually talking about, while casually dismissing the fate of his clan and the deaths of his elite warriors. Like he could have been eating a sandwich. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have to be having like graphic doggy style sex with a concubine.
Right.
But then again, it's just like this world is so I don't know, this world is so fucking nasty that I guess it's maybe tonally appropriate or it's maybe also just sort of like I guess if you're trying to be like do some work for the movie, you could say that like, oh well, it's trying to show how other women in the society are treated. But I don't know. Again, it's just like an explicit sex scene right after the previous sequence is maybe the kind of thing where it's like I don't know. This maybe hasn't some of this movie hasn't aged as great as I would have liked.
Well, I'm so glad that you've said this, Nick, because that is a perfect segue into this quote that I wanted to talk about. It is a serious pendulum swing.
Yes.
And it prompts a discussion in the commentary that I found very compelling. And the assistant art director also, he calls this scene unnecessary.
Yeah.
And Kawahiri pushes back and says, well, it's kind of necessary. It is this old trope. Not to put too fine a point on it, but you always had stuff like this in the B-grade action movies. And these scenes create the atmosphere. And they had discussed the possibility of presenting him as a good guy and then showing his true face later, but decided it wasn't really in their style and that they leaned into the exploitation roots. Sort of to what you were saying about giving them the benefit of the doubt, where it is heightened. People in this movie are extremely honorable or extremely evil.
Yeah, sure.
Blood rains from torn apart ninjas. Sex is happening. The willingness to include the fun but quote unquote unnecessary moments, I think is part of what makes the movie so great. The fact that we are like, oh, I am a little uncomfortable with this. Like, I think is that boundary pushing that I personally respond to in terms of like, it gets an emotion out of me and it makes me think about like, oh, what is it trying to say? It is a clear match cut between her crying face and then like the grunting of the sex that happens in the immediate aftermath.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it just looks like such a fucking, ghoul doing this act. I'll also like it. It's another thing of just like for an exposition like dump conversation scene, it's always like, how do you add some visual interest to this? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're locked into this scene.
For sure.
That's the thing. So it's like I don't know. I'm also like, this is a sort of thing like when you're dealing with animation, it's a different thing from versus like I'm an actual like actors on set or like real human beings are having to perform this. So It's a little bit of a different threshold, I feel like, in terms of what you're depicting when you kind of remove that layer of it. But yeah, I mean, I think probably just a thing that's worth bringing up at least.
Definitely. And I think to that point, that's something that Perfect Blue examines really interestingly. There is the scene where the main character she's shifting into acting. She plays someone who is raped in a TV show, and the disgusting slobbering that's happening that when they're filming, and then the cut to them just being like, oh, like, all right, we have to like wait while they reset the cameras and everything.
Yeah, sure. Right.
It's this real dissonance that I think is so powerful. And you have to ask, like, what is this doing to the people in this position?
Right. And that's also like commenting on like that's just like another thing of like that's in that reality. This is a real person who is acting in this thing, and so like they are dealing with what it's like to be a performer cast in this sort of role. So like but it's also like the whole thing is animated,
right? So
it doesn't have the layer of the actual production is doing this to this actor. I don't know. That's a fucking trip, man.
Sure is.
Yeah.
Jubei, though, is attacked suddenly by Tessai, amazing as he punches from behind a stone wall, then does some, like, crazy roll through it.
This is sick as shit.
It certainly is. They talked about, in the commentary, they were like, Tasai is very popular in the States. They love powerful characters like him. And I was like, you're fucking right, man. I love this dude.
Big rock dude.
Yeah.
Fucking punch the shit out of you.
That's right.
That's great.
Jubei is getting the absolute crap beat out of him, and he says, hey, we're even now, right? But when Tasai says he's going to send him to hell, Jubei pulls the string on his sword and attacks back. And this string, boy oh boy, the unsung hero of the film is the string attached to this sword.
He's lucky to have that string, you know. The smart of him to attach that string.
That's right. I know people can't see it on the camera, but I have like 10 strings trailing behind me, each attached to a sword, just in case, because you never know.
Yeah. I got one with a spatula on it, in case I need to make a grilled cheese in a hurry.
You never know.
You never know.
It does seem bad for Jubei when he can't cut through the rock at first, but in Tasai's lascivious tongue bath, he took in some of the poison that shapes Kagero's fate. She's immune to poison herself, which lets her work as the taster, but only because she carries a toxin herself, which weakened Tasai.
Yeah, and we don't know any of this yet.
Right.
So like you're watching this for the first time, you're just like, oh, he I guess he kicked this guy's ass or whatever, or I guess like his rock body was vulnerable to his own blade, which ends up hitting him.
Right.
But it's like, but no, in reality, you later find out that it's in fact her kiss itself is so deadly, and he puts his mouth on her mouth at a certain point. So that's when I guess he extracts the poison, unbeknownst to him. Yeah, but anyway, the way he dies here is so cool.
It's the best.
We did a very dumb thing on our very dumb podcast. The Doughboys. We did a Patreon episode where we did a kills like a Mount Killmore, where we just picked our favorite kills from like horror movies or other movies. Mm. And one of mine, of course, was Freddy Krueger's "Welcome to Primetime, Bitch."
Classic.
But another one was this one. Was Jubei killing Tasai in Ninja Scroll. His fucking fingers falling off when they get cut in half, and then his own blade going into his fucking forehead, and then he slides down it. It's just, and he's like, the whole time, he's like, wah! He's just like, he's like alive the whole time and in pain. It's insane.
Oh my God.
It's so bloody too.
It really is. And it keeps peaking in a way that you don't necessarily expect, because like it embeds in his head and you're like, okay, that's fucking cool. And then he slams forward and you're like, okay, that's fucking cool. And then he slides down on it, and like suddenly there's this huge smear of blood across the blade, and it's at this crazy Dutch angle. It is really just awesome stuff. It does unleash a huge spray of blood that was, quote, planned since we started making the film. And it's really funny to imagine these guys just being like, oh yeah, and here's where the geyser of gore will go in the outlining meeting. In the aftermath, Jubei is approached by the old man, who congratulates him and invites him to join him in fighting the rest of the devils of Kimon. And Jubei declines, but is warned that the rest of them will pursue him, and makes a verbal gesture towards the assistance of Kagero's poison in an effort to say that Jubei needs partners and can't do it alone. The remaining devils of Kimon are informed that whatever their plan is proceeding on schedule, and the Shogun of the Dark is delivering something. But hey, where the hell is Tasai, they're wondering. So Benisato goes to look for him, which leaves Yurimaru and Zakuro. They're all demons or devils of Kimon. He leaves them alone, where Zakuro confesses her love to Yurimaru, and is firmly rejected.
Yes.
Zakuro's hurt and says, oh, I guess it's true that you're fucking Lord Gemma, but did you know that he's also fucking Benisato?
Right. This is also the kind of thing where it feels like all of them are just weaponizing like love and sex, because they're completely amoral creatures. Right. They don't give a shit. They're just trying to use it as means to an end to advance their own power, you know? So like it's... Yeah, the like all this kind of palace intrigue though among the devils, I think, does add an interesting layer to it, and creates a way where you see some of them. You know, it ultimately, for the narrative, it creates a way where, because they're warring with each other, it's not just Jubei taking them out one by one.
Yeah, definitely.
Like they turn on each other at a certain point.
And Kawajiri was loving this. He said, quote, I think these 3- and 4-way relationships are trashy, but in a good Pulp Fiction way.
Yeah, sure. For sure. It helps it.
Yeah. Benisato has found the corpse of Tesai, but in death, his hand grabbed Jubei so tightly that it imprinted his face, and now the hunt is on. I think that's so funny that he just cracked him that time.
It's so great. It's like Raiders of the Lost Ark of like burning your hand on the amulet, you know, and then you have the imprint of it. It's like that level of like, this is stupid, but in this context, I completely buy this.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We rejoin Jubei cleaning up. I love the like softness to the art in this bath scene, even as he like rips out a loose tooth.
Yeah, Jesus.
And he's surprised to spot who we know to be Benisato sitting on a rock in a very like siren-esque pose. Her back is covered in tattoos of writhing snakes. The soft art does a lot here to create that awesome hypnotic atmosphere as they start to emerge from her skin and she tries to take Jubei out. This is just a moment where the art like just really like stunned me. They have this traditional tattoo coloration on them even as they come to life and emerge from her back. You're just like, fuck, this looks amazing.
Another thing of this sequence, another thing a bro friend like told me, I was like, this fucking she's naked chick, she's got fucking tattoos of snakes, they fucking turn into real snakes, there's like a snake in her vagina, it's fucking crazy. I was like, you know.
Hey, he's right, it is fucking crazy.
It is crazy, yeah.
And it gets even cooler when they lose the traditional tattoo coloration as a ninja star flashes through the air, embedding in Jubei's arm and snapping him out of it just in time to react with his sword as they lunge.
Yeah.
He quickly closes the gap, he grabs for Benisato, but she deflates and crumbles. And you just go, what the fuck? She's a skin bag full of snakes? I hate when that happens. Reminded me a lot of Halloween 3 in this moment, which is a classic.
Oh, sure.
Kawajiri said, I wanted the young guys to do the bees and snakes, but I couldn't find anyone to do the bees. And the assistant art director, he laughed and he said, oh yeah, you wound up doing that yourself. And Kawajiri gets real quiet. He like mutters to himself. You can almost see him rocking back and forth and he goes, nobody wanted to do it. But the star is revealed to come from the old man named Dakwon, who explains more about these ninjas, the Devils of Kimon, who work for the Dark Shogun. He wants to restore the house of Toyotomi to the throne, whereas Dakwon works for the current ruler, the Tokugawa shogunate, and he's here to find out exactly what the hell they're doing in this area. He also reveals the trickery of his poison star and coerces Jubei into working with him. I really want to shout out the like awesome contrast with the brownish water and the blues of the cliff face. It just looks incredible again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Great palette to this.
For sure.
It's also kind of inverted of what you would like the typical colorways would be.
Yeah.
So
oh yeah, that's a really good point.
Makes it look even more like kind of like disturbing and kind of like haunted and horrific.
Definitely, very surreal.
Yeah.
As they travel together, Dakwon he tells a story from Jubei's past, where he says, "Oh, you must be the ninja that stopped a group that was gorging themselves on gold from a newly discovered mine after local powers called the Toyotomi wanted to report the mine to the government out of self-interest in preserving power." Or, so Jubei had been told. In truth, the mine was never reported, and the Shogun of the Dark simply took over himself, murdering any spies sent in for evidence with the Devils of Kimon, led by Hirumu Gemma, Jubei's mortal enemy. What the what?
Huh?
What? Jubei scoffs. He says Gemma is dead. We see the flashback. Jubei was forced to kill his ninja team after Gemma accused him of being a traitor and marked for death, and then he hunted Gemma down himself, cutting off his head while he rode that horse.
You don't have to kill your own ninja team. That's a bad day.
That is.
It's a bad day at the office.
It's the kind of thing where you're like, Jubei, he's a solo vigilante now because he lost his team. It's a tragic tale as old as time. Poor guy. You feel bad for old Jubei there.
I feel bad for him. What choice did he have? They were going to kill him.
So true. He was marked for death.
Yeah.
And they pass through a heavy fog, and they're separated after Dakwon falls. And he escapes Shijima by the skin of his teeth and hiding as a tree limb. This is one of the devils with awesome, like, shadow powers I love him. Also, Dakuan's disguise rocks. His like tree branch disguise.
Yeah, it looks so awesome. Yeah. Well, and also this is the thing. It's just like it's kind of used sparingly. Mm-hmm. You don't see a lot of it, but it makes it seem more powerful that you don't see it like fully utilized.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Jubei goes into a temple and he finds an old woman acting strangely. Turns out she's just another cast-off skin. It looks amazing as she starts to spasm and Jubei has to like cut her and the snakes inside in half.
Yes.
And he looks up and he sees a mass of snakes that ironically carpet the ceiling. And they form a face in the middle. Not the best decor choice, in my opinion. Not how I'd go. But the snakes trap Jubei on the floor and he's interrogated about how many are in their group. Benisato rightfully sees through his lie about a huge group, so he says there's two, the monk and a woman, who's right behind you. Whoa!
This just to talk about the sequence real quick. The swarm of snakes looks so incredible, and it kind of like I have no idea what if it was an actual influence, but it does kind of remind me of how in Princess Mononoke it's kind of like the demon sort of energy inhabits like the boar or whatever, it's like the same sort of mass of kind of black tentacles sort of intermingling, it's just like, again, just amazing craftsmanship.
Definitely an uncomfortable writhing mixed with an insane amount of work that had to go into drawing all those snakes.
Right.
Kagero is indeed there, and she holds Benisato at knife point to call off the snakes. One emerges real sneaky-like from Benisato's vagina and bites Kagero, but she holds firm.
Yeah.
This reversed interrogation is cut short, though, when Benisato is electrocuted via the wire connecting her to Yurimaru. 2 failures in 1 day is unacceptable, after all. This happened to me at my last job, where they were like, we put you on a performance improvement plan, and that involves getting electrocuted by this ninja rope. Sorry, dude.
Yeah. Getting electrocuted by a ninja rope while you're fully nude. Not a great way to go.
No.
Also, this is another thing of just the way these characters are animated. Everyone appears to die in immense pain, right. Which just seem and shock.
Yeah.
And they can't believe they're dying like this, which just again speaks to just how horrific this world is, how awful it is to live in this reality. Your death is inevitable, and it is going to be violent and painful and unexpected.
Absolutely. And I think that this is followed up by another example of sort of that surprising humor that it's not even the most in your face, but I think throughout there are these little moments of levity that help to keep this from becoming oppressive.
Yeah, sure.
Where Dakuan invites Kagero to join them in fighting their common enemy, and he, even though told Jubei that they were partners in this, he refers to Jubei as his assistant, which I thought was very funny. Yeah. She says she needs no one, but might need their info, so agrees to go along. This is also where the reveal of her poison happens. It's a big moment. They say she's the perfect woman for this hellish world.
Right. Is this after because he tries to get to suck the poison out because she gets bit by the snake? She gets bit by the vag snake, and then he's going to suck the poison out, and then she knees him in the face and is like, "I don't need that" or whatever.
Right.
I think it happens around this time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The gang is attacked again with Yurimaru electrocuting the river they're supposedly in, but he correctly surmises that he can't just assume it worked out and sends the 4 remaining demons beside himself and Gemma to check it out. Again, another example of that sort of collateral damage, right? They just murdered an entire ecosystem in this pursuit.
Yes. Swimming fish just turn into dead fish.
Yeah.
The entire bay is just obliterated.
Right. Our gang, though, is investigating the source of this supposed plague. It turns out that the demons actually poisoned the well, then blamed it on disease to keep people away while they mined. And, it just truly is evil shit, right? They're like, we're going to kill this whole town. We're going to kill this whole river. We're going to kill this whole ninja clan. No amount of human life is a stumbling block for this plan.
Yeah, who's this clan taking orders from? The U.S. government?
Whoa, here we go, folks.
We'll be right back. Okay, we're back.
We just had a really long break where I pulled Nick aside and said, it's not that kind of show, dude.
Sorry for getting political, everyone. I apologize.
Nick said it is that kind of show now. He's taking over.
Every show is that kind of show. If you paid attention, what's going on out there?
Take a look around, George.
No one should have any escape from reality. Just be completely omnipresent. No one's allowed to be entertained for 1 second.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. They're spotted by a trio of bees, which report back and bring the rest of the swarm at a demon's command. Another really cool analog technique, they used the screen tone to create the effect of the distant bees, which is really fascinating.
That is cool.
They realize, though, that they can't escape. So Kagero uses her powers to poison the bees with some sort of, sleeping powder. She holds them off while Jubei goes to confront the demon controller Musisho in a nearby mill.
Yeah, and I know we're a little bit past it, but just, we were talking about, all the villagers being massacred or whatever before we get into this fight, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But it is the kind of thing, so, on this rewatch, I'm a little bit more conscious of things like there's the little toy hand drum that Kagero, and there's just a corpse of a child, and just as a little bit of humanity, clasps its hands around the little toy drum, just to and it's just it's a meaningless act, but it's the kind of thing of just these were human lives, mm-hmm. These were souls that were snuffed out in the pursuit of profit. But yeah, this bee fight is awesome.
Definitely. Well, and to your point, I think that it demonstrates sort of an interesting contrast between Daquan saying that she is the perfect woman for this amoral world.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, she is suffering more than most because she has retained some of that humanity.
Right. Because she cares, yeah.
Yeah. But in this mill, two things are revealed. First is that Gemma is alive thanks to his ability to reincarnate and regenerate. And two, that this dude does in fact have the hive on his back. I've heard of putting the team on your back, but this is ridiculous.
George just dunked a basketball.
That's right. I certainly did. Jubei flees to the water, and a handful of demons watch from a root while the bees hover, just waiting for Jubei to emerge. Only he doesn't emerge. He slices the root and Mushizo's whole damn leg off. And when he hits the water, the bees panic and emerge from Mushizo in every direction, exploding him in what seems incredibly unpleasant, I must say.
Yeah, again, just another awful, painful death, but it is really awesome.
Certainly.
Because look, this is a very simple narrative thing that I heard. I don't remember who I heard it from, but it's like a really effective storytelling. This is reductive, but you can kind of think of it as what needs to happen, but you don't know how it's going to happen. And he's going to beat all of these bad guys.
Right.
It's not going to halfway through this character who you've been shown as the hero is just going to be killed by the bee guy and he's just dead for the rest of the movie. That's just not how this is going to progress. That's not how these stories are told. I would watch that. If they could pull it off, that would be an interesting, oh wait, the
bad guys win.
Number 4 got him.
Yeah.
The bad guys just win. Okay, all right. But you don't know how he's going to defeat him, and they do a good job of setting up a series of seemingly invincible bad guys. Yeah, I think this death it's just really cleverly thought out, really coolly rendered visually.
Definitely, yeah. This is one of those I literally paused it just to absorb the image of him in the water, contorted with the streams of blood flowing out. It's shocking. Like you said, they're in shock, and I am in shock at how horrific and violent these deaths are in a way that each one is unique. It never feels repetitive. It's incredible work.
And you also there's something about how ultimately these I forget what are they bees, are they hornets?
They might be hornets, yeah.
They might, whatever they are. These buzzing stingers ultimately don't give a shit about their master.
Right.
They're ready to abandon him for their own survival at the drop of a hat. And that's kind of what this world is doing at large.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Jubei emerges finally. He reckons with the information that Gemma is back. Really cool shot of the screaming, bloody, severed head. Just a cool moment.
Great.
He and Kagero split from Daquan, and he tries to send her home too. but she refuses to leave him there half dead from poison and feeling like she owed him another debt. And he says something that I think is really pivotal, where he says, "You don't have to convince me that you're tough."
Right.
And she bristles really strongly at having been sort of seen through like that. It is a pivotal moment for their relationship, which Kawagiri felt was the most challenging part of this story, was weaving the tender element and growing emotions between these two while not taking the foot off the gas. And I think that the way that he did that is in these sort of smaller moments that are not so, like, in your face with it, where I think some people are like, oh, did they even have any, like, feelings for each other? But I think that if you are really looking at the way that they interact with each other, especially in comparison to the way that they interact with the rest of the world, you definitely see these things growing.
No one, at least as far as what's been depicted and what's implied, no one has ever treated Kagero with any sort of kindness.
Right.
So to find, what I like it's a kind of thing of like, yeah, this is all happening very rapidly for a movie that takes place in one day. That's the other thing. It's all on a super accelerated timeline. It's all very heightened, but it's like, I don't know. I think within its own sort of self-contained world, it is justified.
Definitely. And they spot Hanzo stumbling along. This is the Koga ninja from the beginning. It had seemed like Kagero had some sort of relationship with him in like a Rogue from X-Men sort of way.
Yeah, that might have been, honestly, just based on just going off of what I just said, that might have been one of the only other people who's ever treated her as a human being.
Right, and even he, as we see at the beginning, sort of did still look down on her a little bit, or as sort of weaker than they are because she's a woman, where he was like, you need to stay here and keep doing the tasting, where you go, well, is it because he doesn't want her there? Is it because he wants to protect her? But even that like idea of like, I need to protect you when she is clearly badass and capable is sort of like a relationship, that dynamic that is not as even keeled as the one that she is finding with Jubei.
Yeah, and she feels some loyalty to him, maybe just from her own like kind of like, personal sort of moral code. All this said, I would sure hate to be have my arms chopped off, my mouth stitched shut, my eyes torn out, and then to have my guts implanted with a bunch of gunpowder, and then exploded as a human bomb. This seems like, as far as all the ways to go that I've ever thought of, this seems like one of the worst. I think I would hate to die in this method.
Oh, that's really weird, Nick, because this is actually my number one planned way to go at the end of my life.
Wow, okay. All right, yeah, sure. It's in your living will,
Yeah, right.
It's what you want.
When I'm at the end of my life and I'm becoming infirm, while I can still make the decision, I want them to cut off my arms and sew my mouth shut and fill me with explosives. This is what happens to him. It is very freaky as he lurches towards the cliff. Kagero has, this relationship with him, plus layer on the guilt. She does not see any danger happening here as she runs over. But Jubei spots Zakuro nearby controlling him. She filled him with this gunpowder. She explodes him as Jubei tackles Kagero. It's really disturbing. I love also the reaction where Zakuro cackles and she says, I'm sure that's the smell of success mixed with the succulent smell of well-done roasted flesh.
Yeah.
Like, she is so joyfully evil. I think that is part of what I like about them leaning into the exploitation elements of this, is that, well, I think there is a lot of value in these sort of tortured villains who are like, oh, am I the bad guy? What am I doing wrong? There is as much value in having someone that is a sketch of a person and is truly evil, that you get to go like, wow, look at this evil person and how crazily evil they are. And they love it. She's cackling her damn head off here.
I've gotten, I used to love, like, it's interesting how you kind of, like, your tastes change over time and sometimes swing back. I used to be really into, like, moral ambiguity, and there isn't a clear, like antagonist, like everyone kind of has their own agenda and you can kind of sympathize with everyone. But I think maybe also like just partly based on how rotten I've come to learn the world is, and how just like completely just fully in for themselves a lot of the most powerful people are.
Right.
I've gotten more into just like a clear like bad guy.
Definitely.
And like Hideo Kojima, there is nothing subtle that in this work. It's all very straightforward. It is all on the surface. It is operatic, and that's very much what this one is. Because again, just like people who are just like completely. This complete shitheads, for lack of a better term, just exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thrive.
Right. And even Dakuan thinks that these two are done for after this, but it turns out old Jubei had a trick up his sleeve, literally, and it's the string attached to his sword, which allowed them to dangle from a branch. Tale as old as time, baby. You gotta have that string.
Yeah. Love that string.
That's right. Love that string.
He should say, love that string. That would be my executive note. If I was like the CEO of like some big media corporation.
Yeah.
How come he doesn't say love that string? He seems to really like the string.
He does, and I might even tag on and say, he needs a catchphrase. It could be love that string. He says it after every time that he uses it.
I could put love that string on a t-shirt, like easy. That could be a meme. Let's make that a meme. Love that string.
All right.
Again, I'm the CEO of a media corporation. I don't understand how things work. Let's make that a meme. That should be a meme.
Hey, make that go viral, please.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Kagero is devastated that she fell for this trap. And Jubei doesn't accept her self-pitying, just drop me, which I also think is very funny. That he's like, shut the fuck up. Just like, let's get up here. Right. And they haul up the side. As they did, though, the branch broke. But the sword caught on something else, and we didn't see what it was. But as they emerge at the top, it's revealed that it was another demon, Majuro the Blind Swordsman, who had been longing to challenge Jubei. Very Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman here. Very cool stuff.
This is awesome. This is a great, like, again, one of the best animated of the boss fight set pieces. Mm-hmm. It's also kind of a nice, just sort of contra to what we were just saying. It's kind of a nice break that you have perhaps the most honorable of the devils that he's doing battle with, and you kind of see what it's like for someone who wants to compete on a fair playing field, but is still extremely powerful.
Right.
I'm also just like a big fan. I know it's very tropey, but of just like, what you perceive as a weakness is in fact my strength. That's obviously what's going on with this character.
Definitely. And in fact, even flipping it where what you think is your strength is your weakness when he's blinding him with the reflection.
Right. Yeah.
But they do duel in this nearby bamboo forest. In the commentary, they were like, you can't even tell that they're running through different layers of bamboo at this speed. And the director was like, it just needs to be worth it. Please watch carefully. Go frame by frame on the Blu-ray. We put so much work in. They also said, if you want to choose an impressive location, choose one with fewer objects, like bamboo groves. Not too many buildings and structures. There's not enough variation. They look too similar, especially in Japan where we have flat homes. So I thought that was interesting that he could sort of really use like trees as like a simple structure that has a lot of variation built in.
Sure.
Jubei does win the duel thanks to the help of Kagero, and they verbally spar about each other seemingly having a death wish. Jubei asks dispassionately, did the poison twist your heart too?
Yeah. It's also, by the way, it's cool how he wins the duel, where he has like the sword that's like, lodged in the bamboo, and that's like that he thinks that that's where his position is, but that's how he uses it as a feint and is able to defeat him. It's really clever.
Nice stab through the gut. Just classic. Yeah. But Jubei leaves Kagero alone in the grove to contemplate this death wish that she seems to have, and he spots a wrecked ship. Whatever cargo it carried was the reason the demons slaughtered the town, but when Kagero joins him again, she faints from exhaustion and they rest in a little alcove. It is a really nice scene. This is the one I was talking about before where he throws her the tomato, but just the environment is really beautiful. It's very verdant, but also very confined and juxtaposed against this completely white background. It makes it feel both very surreal and like they're also totally isolated and comfortable.
Yeah, right.
It's a really cool like visual indicator of that deepening feeling as they care for each other in this aftermath.
Like they found the campfire save point.
Exactly.
Like this is like, okay, we don't have to worry about bad guys here.
Right. And as she recovers some strength, the front comes back and she threatens him again. And he is like, aren't we past this? At this point, you can see how annoyed he is. But
yeah,
the Shogun of the Dark's men are almost there with a boat to claim the cargo, which we finally see stacks and stacks of chests at the dock. Daquan, who joins them here, predicts the cargo is all gold. Gold from the secret mine meant to fund the coup.
I love gold.
Yes. That's right. He's a regular gold member here. and a lot of people are saying, in fact, that Goldmember is one of the movies that was influenced by Ninja Scroll in a
Yeah, I mean, that would make a lot of sense,
right.
You can kind of see the long tail of influence.
Definitely. And a lot of people are just like, oh, it's weird when Goldmember puts on a tree disguise and he pretends to be a branch. But when you realize where the character kind of comes from, the lineage is clear.
It's kind of funny because you watch Ninja Scroll and you're like, well, I saw this before. And you're like, wait, no, Goldmember took this from Ninja Scroll. That's crazy. Wow.
Wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what, that's the thing is Mike Myers was always watching these, these British comedies that his dad was a fan of. And then also a really violent anime.
A true student. Hey, that's where So I Married an Axe Murderer came from too. So.
It makes total sense.
Yeah. One other thing I want to point out here is the really awesome use of vertical space in the whole movie.
Oh my God, yes. God, that's the sort of thing. It's that's not easy to film in live action either.
Definitely.
Is to represent that scale and represent that how much, it's really well done with these exterior, with these wide shots.
Definitely. And they talked about how part of their general technique was moving from near to far instead of side to side to give depth to the picture, especially because this movie's in a 4:3 aspect ratio.
Yeah,
so side to side movements, even less visually effective. Again, this sort of idea of using your constraints as a tool to do something innovative is just so remarkable. And they do such a beautiful job with it.
I've gotten more into 4x3 as I've gotten older. I've just I really appreciate
Love a square. Or, close to a square.
A near square, yeah,
exactly. Kagero sends off a message to the Chamberlain now that they know what the deal is so that he can send his army, but Dakuan doesn't think they'll act. After all, can a small clan like that afford to pick sides in the power struggle between the Tokugawa and the Shogun of the Dark?
Yeah.
I think not, Nick.
No, I think not.
They spot Shijima, the Shadow Demon, who emerges to fight. Jubei pursues, and in the brief separation, Kagero threatens Daquan to tell her the antidote. And while we don't hear it just yet, she's clearly shocked, and he says, I'm being honest, that's the only way.
Yes, yeah.
The problem is that Jubei was led into a trap, and Shijima doubled back, kidnapping Kagero into the shadows. Jubei goes after her, dismissing Dakuan as just as much a monster as the demons for his uncaring ways. He says, when you fight a monster, you become one yourself or you can't win. And Jubei is out to prove him wrong.
I love how cool it looks to just sort of a character that can move into and out of shadows. Mm-hmm. It's just, again, it's just really great visual invention.
Definitely is.
And then we have our... Right, there's a you talked about at the top of the episode how they were trying to avoid the bird messenger device, but they actually end up using it. I think after this scene.
That's right. Yeah, he has the one the one bird that they said we can't avoid it because she's not a devil, so she doesn't have the twine. But no,
it's
telegraphs.
Also funny to be we got to avoid that thing, and it's just you got to avoid the coolest shit that people love. I guess, but I don't mind a bird with a little with a little message in its claws.
No, definitely not. One other thing I love about this scene where Jubei is fighting fighting with Dakuan. There's a really great pink in the sky during that conversation.
Right.
That is a prelude to the entirely red and black dusk scene, which is both stunning visually and extremely intense. Kawajiri said, "What can I say? It was normal for an action movie 10 years ago."
I gotta watch some of these action movies in Japan from 10 years ago.
The harsh shadows, though, do make this a perfect battlefield for Shijima, who is revealed to be controlling Kagero's mind. And the two attack Jubei together, but he stabs into the shadow that the chain weapon is emerging from, and he stabs Shijima, who dies in this fucking awesome way where he, like, falls out. Ugh. I love it.
It's also just he's Shadow Guy is enough, but they're like, no, but he's also got like a fucking steampunk grappling hook, like they add that on top of
claw,
it.
Yeah, oh, it's sick.
Yeah, it's so cool.
And thankfully this death releases Kagero, who is shocked to see that she has stabbed Jubei through the arm, and he passes out. But when he wakes, she's disappointed that there's been no movement by the Chamberlain, saying, oh, it's been 2 hours, he should be here by now. She's also confused as to why he came for her, despite knowing that it was a trap. And he said, because we're comrades. He says it like she's a fucking idiot. He's like,
yeah, right.
This is like, we've saved each other over and over again since yesterday. You're a precious friend to me at this point. And she is stunned into silence by this. But she approaches and then attempts to pay her life debt once again with the antidote, revealed to be the poison in her touch. Sort of like an antibodies thing, I guess, and like they'd interact and cleanse each other through their mutual toxicity. There is this idea of them being poisoned by the world and how amoral it is, but finding each other and that connection is what allows them to sort of remain pure within it.
I can buy that.
Yeah.
I like that theory.
I like how it's clearly not easy for her to be vulnerable like this. We've seen the front that she has put on all this time. So when it drops, I think that both the animation and the voice performance do a really good job of sort of getting that insecurity that she is revealing here.
Yeah, sure.
He grabs her and pulls her in tight for a hug, but then walks away. And she says, "You'll die if you don't. Why not?" But he's silent, and she falls to her knees to cry. They talked about in the commentary how important pacing was as he leaves her there naked. Too slow, and he seemed reluctant or unsure. Too quick, and it came off rude. He said, quote, "It might have been best if I'd made him jump out of a window." The Shogun of the Darks Ninjas have arrived. I actually love the loop of recycled ninja animations. It happens a few times, but it actually really works for me. It's a nice rhythm, and it really makes them feel endless and unstoppable, inhuman almost.
Yeah, sure. No, it's making a what could be a weakness a strength, you know?
Definitely. Jubei is planning to sneak on and sink the boat in the ocean since they can't take on all the ninjas themselves, but suddenly the Chamberlain is there with his army. And when Kagero goes to report in, she notices they're surrounded by enemy ninjas, and the Chamberlain runs her through with his sword. You go, what the fuck?
Come on, what are you doing?
Right.
Chamberlain?
Wilt.
Come on, Wilt.
He died 2 days ago, and this was Gemma all along.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
There is a huge fight, and Jubei is a madman. He's slaughtering ninjas left and right. I again love that this surreal white background comes in again. It happened a few times, but it does feel like when they sort of leave their reality and sort of fade from that world, it becomes this light background that just really works for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yurimaru begs Gemma to let him take Jubei, so Gemma heads aboard the ship, and Yurimaru also sends away that disgusting failure Zakura. And he does get the drop on Jubei, with the wire around his neck coursing with electricity. But as Yurimaru admires his work, he notices a rat run in, and in fact, it's acting kind of strange, because it lurches over and overturns, and we see its stitched up stomach, because it is in fact a rat bomb sent by Zakuro to kill both of these bums. Revenge on 2 ninja birds with 1 rat stone.
Classic rat bomb.
Yep.
Have you ever seen that movie Day of the Dolphin? That's the George C. Scott movie.
My friend Patrick just gave me that movie. I haven't watched it yet, but he was saying that it's cool. I love George C. Scott, so
yeah. But it's a similar sort of like it's like the plot. I mean, I think it's, you know, it in the premise of it, but like the whole the idea, and it's less a reveal and more just like a thing that is that it's going to be a dolphin bomb.
That's right.
Like animal bombs are such an interesting idea because like it is the sort of thing of just like you see a rat running there, you're like, hey, get out of here, but I don't really need to worry about you. you know.
Definitely.
No, it's loaded up with gunpowder.
That's right. And once again, we see how innovative Austin Powers was because, of course, they recreate the dolphin bomb with the frickin' shark with frickin' laser beams on their frickin'
right.
heads.
Of course. Yeah. Wow.
Jubei drops down the hatch, and Sakura celebrates with the arm that lands in front of her, which I thought was very funny. Again, delightfully joyous in her evil. And Gemma shows no emotion as he gives the command to cast off.
Don't you think at a certain point, like, aren't these big bosses at least concerned that all of their underlings are being, like, executed one by one?
You'd think.
Like, I feel like you see so much of this happening, and it's always just like, I guess they were too weak for the task. And it's like, well, I don't know, man. Maybe you're in some trouble here. Maybe if all of your, like, most loyal, most powerful, chieftains are being offed by the same dude, maybe you might be in some hot water yourself, buddy.
Hey, you don't become a villain without a healthy dose of hubris, I'm afraid.
I guess so. I guess that's the whole thing.
Jubei runs and he clutches Kagera's body as she fades away, and she says that part of why she fell for him was that he didn't treat her as expendable, but as a human, direct contrast with everyone we've seen to this point on both sides of the conflict.
Yeah.
She also says that she wished he'd taken her up on her offer, whether out of pity or for the antidote, but because she was scared to be honest about her feelings. Really awesome art as his hair falls in his eyes, and he says it's not over yet, and the music swells, and they smooch.
Yeah. And they kiss, and, it's, again, an important, a key plot thing that has been communicated that even her kiss is poisonous, so,
Right, enough to weaken Tessai and that his whole power fell apart, so.
And enough to, if we're talking by the power of, the way this poison works, then also that's the kind of thing that could ultimately cure a Jubei.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
She dies in his arms, giving him her headband as a token and saying she was happy she met him, which is very sad. It's a sad death. It's effective.
It's brutal that she's actually killed. Like, you don't think that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You don't think they're actually going to do this. And then they have the finality of, like, she has, like, effectively a Viking funeral afterwards. It's not like, oh, there's a chance she's going to pop up at the at the end and, like, I'm okay, actually. Right. It's like, no, they're sending her off on a ship to sea. It's a lifeless corpse.
Absolutely. And I think that it almost is so fascinating that they do an effective enough job at building this relationship that despite sort of knowing the trope of the lone swordsman and knowing that this sort of like enter with the wind and leave with nothing but the wind, it's like absurd to imagine that this story ends with him like having a love interest and having a relationship, because of course he needs to continue his journey, but they do such a great job of making you want that it is still effective and a gut punch that he doesn't get it.
And even if you're like in the back of your mind, like, well, yeah, obviously they're not going to end up together, you still are like, well, but at the end of it, her journey is going to be like, oh, I've learned how to stand up for myself. And I've learned that, you know what, even if no one else sees me as a human being, I see myself as a human being. And but it's like, no, this is a merciless world. You're going to die.
That's right.
And it's pretty brutal. All that said, he should have just railed her when he had the chance. I mean, come on. They should have just railed each other. They both wanted it.
These crazy kids, man.
What are we doing? Just rail each other.
They can't be honest about their feelings, and
then no one gets railed and one gets killed. Come on. Start railing.
Oh, I think all this whole movie probably could have been avoided if everybody was just railing each other all over the place.
Take a cue from the Chamberlain. That guy loves to rail.
That's right. Hey, I mean, truly though, imagine like if they fucked and suddenly Dakwon's like, oh shit, I have no leverage over these two.
Yeah, for sure.
But he sends her body out to sea, as you said. He puts on her headband and he tears off his sleeve to show that it's business time.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Love that move in an action movie.
That's right. And Jubei rides a horse alongside the boat and then straight into the fucking ocean, which I laughed so hard. That poor horse being forced to paddle along. But he heads for the boat. Dakwon made it aboard too. He's looking lustily at the chests of gold while Sakura watches him from the rafters. Gemma, meanwhile, is busy betraying the Shogun of the Dark. They plan to use the gold to buy advanced weaponry from Spain and use it for the coup, but the devils of Camon will take it instead to build an army of ninja and rule the nation with terror from the shadows.
Yeah.
I hate when that happens.
But again, it's just shades of Dr. Evil forging that alliance with Goldmember.
Yes.
Like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, you're both out for your own self-interest.
That's right.
You're not gonna be buddies forever. You know, This is going to dissolve at a certain point.
So true.
Yeah.
The problem is that Dakuan has covered Sakura with oil, and Jubei has made it aboard, lights the trail with the candle, and he explodes her gunpowder ass, putting a huge hole in the boat, which is going down, baby. Gold and all.
Explodes her gunpowder ass.
That's right.
That's what happens.
That's what happens, dude. He's
just saying the facts.
That's right. It's the traditional Brazilian butt lift, I believe, is packing it in with gunpowder. So
yeah, it's again just like another like oh my god, I can't believe I'm getting exploded face.
Yep.
You know, whole boat is on fire. This is also another thing of just like. You just see it all up on screen. It's just like it's so cool looking. There's so much work went into these sequences, and it is just like this big bombastic set piece.
Definitely.
That takes you to the finish line.
Also, a real actual thing that was influenced by this. The ending of Uncharted 4 is so similar to this ending that
oh wow,
it feels like it must be influenced by it in some capacity to me.
Okay, so I have not played Uncharted 4. I gotta play Uncharted 4.
You gotta play Uncharted 4, dude. That game rocks.
I played 1 through 3, and then I do really like them, but it's just those games just sometimes just miss.
Definitely.
That's one I meant to go back to. I'll play.
Well,
it.
consider it recommended, especially now that you know that there's a damn ninja scroll sequence at the end of it. So
that's awesome. I'll look for that.
Yeah. I also love that Kawahiri said had to be a duel for the final boss. That it had to be Gemma awaiting Jubei in the hold amidst the flames.
For sure. Has to be.
And the fight begins after some classic taunting. It is a sick fight. Gemma is a brawler who fights with his fists. He used an armored sleeve as defense. It rocks.
It's so cool.
And he's quick, seemingly about to take out Jubei until that string comes in handy once again. Love that string.
Love that string.
And Jubei chops Gemma's arm off.
Can we make a love that string TikTok?
All right.
Can that be a TikTok?
I think so.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll TikTok that for
That's
us.
right.
All right, great. Let me know when that TikTok is up. I love this is very tropey as well, but like once the villain has already lost everything, their plan has been destroyed, but they're still like, I'm still gonna fucking kill you. Because it's like they're just motivated by pure rage. I love any time a fight gets to that level of stakes.
Oh, yeah. And Jubei is sort of in the same boat, right? Where he's out for revenge, too. So, and double revenge, because his original ninja clan and everything, too. So
right.
The rumors, though, are proven before our eyes as the arm melds back into Gemma's body through his immortality-based ninja arts. Nobody can kill me. You of all men should know that, he says.
Yeah.
Jubei won't accept this, though, and he stoves Gemma's head in with his own, bluntly beating him to a pulp and saying, I'll kill you as many times as it takes. Gonna take at least one more, though, as Gemma's face reinflates. Or at least 2 more as he emerges from the rubble with a beam speared through his chest. Or at least 3 more as he pounds Jubei's back from the other side of a sword. It's just so impactful to see all of these things happening, the body being torn asunder time and time again, and him, that rage being so strong and animating that is what pushes him forward to keep this fight going.
And speaking of animation, when just like his face being recrafted after his head has been fucking just bludgeoned into nothingness. Like that, like reconstituting looks so amazing.
It really does.
Yeah.
Jubei slices up, though, and the halves of Gemma start to seal back up. But the flames have finally melted the gold, which appears in a flood washing over Gemma. And now he's a disgusting, drippy gold monster. And he reaches for Jubei once more, but Jubei sends him to burn in his golden hell, slicing his arm and fleeing as the ship finally crumbles.
Really, really cool death. I mean, it's this is the kind of thing where it's like, first off, I just don't know the chemical properties, the melting point of gold enough to know if this would actually happen.
It's definitely low.
It is pretty low. So I guess this is probably a thing that is at least plausible. I mean, a movie that's fully implausible. But also, it's like, so he's immortal, right? So this is like a fate worse than death. He's coated in gold and
sinks to the bottom of the damn ocean.
Sinks to the bottom of the sea, and so he's just condemned to be there for all time or at least until he is discovered, right? And it's just like that's a true nightmare.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Really is.
Yeah, but I mean, he clearly deserves it because he's an absolute monster, but Jesus Christ.
Certainly. Jubei clutches Kagero's headband as Dakuan comes to gloat. He says, turns out my combining a poison-tasting ninja girl with a talented lone wolf was a brilliant plan after all.
Yeah. What a fucking dork. He's a dork.
He also says manipulating Kagero into having some time as a normal girl was part of his plan too. But Jubei isn't impressed. And he sees through his manipulative character, slices out, cuts a hidden gold bar from Dakuan's sleeve into the ocean, and says, that's your payment, instead of the 100 gold pieces you owed me. Now don't ever let me see you again, you bum. And Dakuan cackles. He says, I was gonna kill you when you came to collect the payment, but you won't even make it to shore in your condition. The fucking ending of this being just doubling down on everyone is scum.
Yes,
his willingness to treat them as pawns knows no bounds. Shocking.
Also, Dakuan should have just taken more than one gold bar. I mean, come on, there's so many gold bars there, dude.
For sure.
How heavy are these things? Just load up your backpack.
Load the hell up. He's a nimble fellow. He can make it work.
Right.
But Jubei smirks and he leaps into the water. And we see he does make it as he exits once more with the wind at his back and the headband tied around his sword. Credits!
It rocks. 10 out of 10. I think so there is a Ninja Scroll series, which came about in the 2000s. I've never actually watched this. Maybe honestly, I will after we've done this episode, because it's, this whole exercise has reinvigorated my interest in the Ninja Scroll franchise. But I don't know if it follows Jubei. I assumed it did. I assume that's what's going on. I also don't know how good it is, if it's up to the quality level. It certainly does have the reputation of this movie, but I imagine it's at least fun for fans of the franchise.
Sure,
or fans of the film.
Jubei's the style of story that follows Jubei lends itself to that serialization, I think, in an interesting way, where it could be sort of a ninja of the week almost.
Exactly. Right. It's almost like, honestly, makes more sense as a serialized TV show, as opposed to a standalone movie. Yeah, it is Jubei in the series. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
But now, Nick, we've reached the part of the episode where we sum up why this isn't just a good horror movie, but is, in fact, the best horror movie ever made. And I'm going to let you start.
Wow, thanks so much, George. I think the case for this being the best horror movie ever made, first off, it has awesome horror. This is just a terrifying world that you absolutely would not want to spend 1 second in. If your life was inhabiting this world, your fate in all likelihood would be like one of the countless slaughtered villagers who are just prey for the powerful as they try to achieve their own greedy ends. I also think that the violence in this movie, which is such a signature of one of the so-called body genres, horror, is so hyper-violent. It is such a bloody movie. The death and dismemberment that takes place in this film is absolutely shocking and rendered so vividly that it sticks in your mind as particularly horrific. I think there are memorable images from this film that are a product of the violent acts that you witness as a viewer. And also, I think the ultimate resolution of this film is, like, in a horror sense, like horror films, I don't feel like ever end on a purely positive note. It's always like, I have endured the unimaginable, and I have to figure out a way to continue to survive with all the baggage that I've accumulated from this experience. I'm maybe not even necessarily stronger from this, but I am forever changed. And I think that very much is Jubei's journey through the course of this movie. So yeah, I think this absolutely makes sense as the greatest horror film of all time. I mean, if that didn't convince you. He gets a fucking bladed boomerang in his fucking head, and then he fucking slams down, and he's alive the whole fucking time. It's fucking sick as hell, bro.
Holy shit.
It's fucking sick. You gotta see this shit, man.
Fucking sick.
Yeah, I heard they don't even rent it at Blockbuster. Like, it's like you have to go to like another video store. It's like it's basically like illegal. It's
dude,
fucking sick.
My brother could get you a copy of it.
Oh man, yeah. If your brother could like burn me a visual CD of it, I would fucking love that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
To me, this is the best horror movie ever made because I think that it fully embodies a quote from Mr. Kawahiri, and I think that you touched on this in your opinion, your closing statement here as well. He said, "One of the fun things about watching movies, or in other words, one of the greatest pleasures, is seeing a world that was hitherto unseen. I believe this film enables you to see things that you've never seen." And he's right.
Wow.
I've seen some shit in this movie that not only had I not seen before, I never expected to see.
Yeah,
it was surprising and poignant and powerful and a gut punch and bloody and funny and 1,000 different things that are sort of belied by its simplicity. It is fantastic in terms of the technique. As we talked about, it's on the precipice of digital animation, which means that it's had this time to gestate, but is still the popular form. People are dedicated to it, and these are masters of the craft coming together in unison to just absolutely knock it the fuck out of the park. The voice acting is incredible. We didn't talk about it that much, but I think that especially in an era where people do not value the dubs as much, there is a good dub. We have seen both. And I think that the dub is fine. And I think that the voice actors in both do a good job of, sort of existing in this world and being believable despite the fictionality of it and the, excess, the heightened aspect of it. They make it feel real, or at least like, it's real enough. And I just think that it's fucking badass, man. The guy explodes into fucking bees fucking underwater. Sick. It's Holy incredible. Shit. What else do you need, people? And that's what makes this the best horror movie ever made. Nick, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This was an absolute blast. Please.
Yeah, what a treat.
Tell the people where they can find you, where they can listen to your other shows, all that jazz.
Oh, hey, I got Doughboys, the podcast about chain restaurants with me and my co-host Mike Mitchell. Each week we review a different chain. Hey, like Philadelphia's own Wawa, which we did when we were there.
That's
Rita's
right.
Italian Ice.
I was there. Great song.
You were there.
That's right.
Wow. That was a... look, I'll say this about the Philadelphia crowd. Y'all were drunk, but it was a lot of fun.
I won't deny it.
We had a blast there. We should go back at a certain point. But yeah, we reviewed different chain restaurants, mostly national chains, but some regional chains. So check that out. And then I've also got Get Played. That's my video game show with me and Heather Ann Campbell and Mara Podaka. And we talk all things gaming.
I highly, highly encourage you to check out both of those things. Doughboys is, of course, a delight. Get Played is, of course, a delight. Get Animated is a third delight, and is, of course, relevant to this. I had a wonderful time. I recently watched Evangelion for the first time. I had a wonderful time listening along. So definitely encourage people to check that out. As far as my plugs, people can check out the back catalog. We've had a lot of really awesome guests that you might know, including such people as Mike Mitchell from the Doughboys, Matt Apodaca from Get Played.
Wow.
All kinds of great guests. Hayes Davenport was on pretty recently to talk about Under the Silver Lake, which was a really, really awesome movie to dive into. John Gabris was just on talking about Cat's Eye. So Stephen King, hey, if you want to hear us talk about the man, the to be hailed as genius man himself, check out that Stephen King app. All kinds of really great stuff in the back catalog. Check it out. I'm sure you'll find someone you know and love.
What do you remember what Mitch talked about and what Matt talked about offhand?
Yes, Matt talked about Barbarian, which was a really fun, one of our more modern movies, which was really cool to be able to explore that. And Mitch has actually been generous enough to come on 3 times times. That's right. Once he did Child's Play. That was his first one because, of course, famously had the Mickey doll that frightened him as a child, and so
yes, of course, yes.
stems partially from Child's Play, so that was a big one. Then he came back to talk about The Blob 1988, special effects powerhouse flick.
Right.
And then recently we did I did a 24-hour live stream to sort of reach for 100,000 downloads. And we made it, and to celebrate, we had this great live stream.
Congrats, buddy.
Thank you. And Mitch came on. We did a commentary for Gremlins. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, man.
So shout out to Mitch. Thanks, man.
Ones. There you go. Yeah, shout out to Mitch. Great. We love Mitch. Way to go, Mitch.
Well, this is, I'm sure, the beginning of a long and fruitful relationship between you and myself, Wiger.
For sure.
And so we will get you back to overthrow his numbers. You'll be the 4-timer club.
There we go. Usurp his ass.
That's right.
No, this was a blast. Thanks so much for having me on to talk about this film at length. It's a film I've seen a number of times, but had not seen in a number of years. It was really interesting to revisit it. The one thing that I guess we maybe should have touched on at a certain point, and I'll say now, this film is frustratingly inaccessible.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think you had to order a physical DVD. I watched this. I downloaded a torrent, which I am not above doing if something is not available through any legitimate means for streaming or for purchase, which is the case with Ninja Scroll. It would be awesome if at a certain point, maybe the Wachowskis themselves, but someone who has some clout in the industry, who has some appreciation for this film, is able to get this out of rights hell and get it and let it have a proper Western release at long last. Because I own this DVD. This was one of the first anime DVDs I ever owned when I was younger. And nowadays, if I want to watch it again, I've got to jump through a bunch of hoops.
Absolutely. And to that point, even though I did buy the DVD copy of it, in order to hear the commentary, which was only on the Blu-ray, I did also have to download a torrent.
Yeah,
so
it's frustrating.
It's just not accessible in a meaningful way. To access these valuable pieces of extra content, like the commentary lent a lot. I think it's a huge part of sort of understanding what they're thinking in scenes like the assault scenes, where you're like, oh, this is maybe unnecessary. I'd like to hear from the director. It's invaluable, and it's a shame when things become unavailable like that. So I definitely would love for this to get a great new release, along with anime in particular has this issue, but it does extend beyond that. So
for sure,
archiving, very valuable and important. Highly encourage people to be careful with the DVDs that they're throwing away. So.
That a lesson I had to learn the hard way, including with this film, which I used to own, and which at a certain point I'd probably just sold to a Hollywood Video or whatever for store credit, whatever dumb shit I did.
There we go. And on that note of warning, folks, I think we'll leave you here. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Wow.